Welcome everyone to this session on mobilizing youth for AI-powered climate action. My name is Salina Abraha. I will be moderating for today. And before we start, I just want to give us some context to ground these discussions and a bit of a reality check, because we are in the midst of a climate crisis that is happening right now. Just 2 days ago, the World Food Programme announced that 13 million people are facing severe hunger as drought wreaks havoc in East Africa. We're experiencing the driest conditions in decades. And this is absolutely terrifying, but I also find a lot of hope, because in the midst of this crisis and increasing disasters across the world, there's also a rising mobilization and movement of citizens, of young people, of scientists, indigenous people who are stepping up to take action. And today we want to focus on the youth climate movement. And as someone who's been working in this space for 7 years now, I want to share a huge moment of progress that we had last year in the lead up to the climate change conference, COP26 in Glasgow. So I was fortunate enough to have joined almost 400 other young leaders from across the globe in Milan last year for the first ever Youth for Climate Summit. We worked for 3 days to produce a manifesto and presented it to world leaders. It was truly an incredible process, similar to what we're seeing at this conference here. And the Youth for Climate Manifesto ultimately emphasized the real importance of young people and the role that they play in providing innovative solutions to address the climate crisis. So this is what we want to highlight in this session today. We're talking about mobilizing youth for AI-powered climate action. And it's ultimately about better understanding the role that AI can play in accelerating, in scaling, designing efficient climate solutions. Understanding the main requirements, what does it mean to be equitable, to be ethical, and most importantly, we have a goal of mainstreaming AI into the climate conversation that young people are currently having right now. So I am not an expert in AI. I have never had a conversation on artificial intelligence before, and that is okay, because we've designed this session to be a safe space for everyone to learn, to discuss, and really identify the next steps that we can take together. So we'll kick it off with a wonderful panel discussion, and there'll be time for Q&A. So please do submit your questions as we're moving along. There is a link and you can submit them in Slido. So we'll throw that in the chat now. And at the end, we'll have an opportunity to really shape the AI manifesto in breakout group discussions. But without further ado, since I am not the expert, I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists for the evening. If you don't mind, please give everyone a wave as I introduce you so they know who you are. So first up, we have Pooja Tilavala, who is the founder of the Youth Climate Collaborative. We have David Dow, the founder of Game Forest, which leverages tech to prevent deforestation and a researcher at Climate Change AI. Regina Cervera, who is the AI for Climate Global Forum Coordinator at C-Minds. And last but not least, Seth Bloom, mediator and program associate at the Meridian Institute. Thank you everyone for joining us in this evening for this discussion and for being part of my journey as I get to better understand the role that AI can play in climate action. So to kick it off, I want to throw the ball to David, because you're a researcher at the intersection of AI and climate. You're a member of the team at Climate Change AI. And your team has recently published a paper, which is called Tackling Climate Change with Machine Learning. You outlined 13 different areas of climate action where AI could potentially be deployed. So I'm curious, because when we did our own manifesto process, we identified several sectors such as sports, fashion, education, finance, food, as areas where youth can really play a huge role in accelerating climate solutions. So can you tell us more about the areas that you identified in this report, and just give us an overview of your findings so that we can frame and really anchor today's discussions and this information. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here about this recent report. So after Climate Change AI is a catalyst that consists of international volunteers, researchers, AI researchers that focuses on the intersection of climate change and AI. And we looked into fields of which are the sectors that contribute the most emissions for climate change. And we discovered basically, if you slice emissions into a huge pie, you do have the electric system, right? Which is fossil fuel energy. Then you have agriculture, forest, you have the transportation system, and you have society as its whole, like the food system and fashion. And to give you a high overview of what the report is about, you can look up the 13 areas, of course, and all the different use cases, what we say AI can be helpful for. But to frame it like this, AI is very good in multiple things. It's good in optimizing things. So many of the use cases in the report focuses on optimizing energy efficient solutions, such as, can we, for example, think about our current electric system, use AI to optimize the energy usage, right? Can we optimize existing supply chains of food waste? I believe this is hugely where youth also plays a huge leading role in the food system and in the fashion system, the supply chain in general. How can we optimize? How can we reduce waste? What AI is also very good in is monitoring. So because an AI algorithm, a computer, doesn't sleep, doesn't get tired, it can look at data as soon as it arrives, right? So why is that important? For countries who are following NDCs, who have to like commit on their emission targets, it's really important for them to report how much progress they have done. And usually that is a self-report. So there's initiatives currently like Climate Trace, led by Al Gore, or other initiatives that use AI algorithms, satellite-based algorithms, where we assume that these are reliable global coverage data, look at countries and monitor, provide more transparency, especially important in the forest sector, where I dedicate a lot of my research personally. It's important to see where forests are burning, because if you can't protect what you can't measure. And the last part is scale. AI algorithms, because they are not sleeping, because they're good at optimizing, you can bring out your message at a larger scale than before. And that can be leveraged by the youth in an extraordinary way. So you can imagine one of the things we are good at, right, as young people, is that we can get our voices to be heard out, right? Like we might not be right now in a power position like the generation before us, or the 2 generations before us, but we do understand how to try to communicate the science. And using AI and AI technology, there's a much larger opportunity for us to reach potential messages. So I can provide you, for example, with a scaling solution where we use AI to provide decision makers with a lot of information, compromise it together, and then bring it out at the right people, because we understand exactly what are the decision systems that is basically currently existing. So let me end with this note, because I can already see this was like a really high level overview. As Climate Change AI, when we designed that report, we emphasized in the very first paragraph that artificial intelligence has to be seen as a tool, not a silver bullet to the climate change crisis, because there's no silver bullet for this immense crisis. So we have to always, when we keep this discussion ongoing, we need to be sure and understand that in the end, the decision is made by the decision maker and not by the algorithm. So for that, I will forward it back to the panel.
Thank you. That's really helpful to have outlined kind of the role that AI can play in optimizing, in monitoring, and then the scale component. And also this last piece that you touched on AI being a tool and not a silver bullet. I'd love, to talk more about that, because, we often feel that technology may come in and save us at the last minute. And that's the impression you can get with, climate change and just all the different ways we can engineer our planet. And so I'd love to talk a bit more about how this potential is being taken into practice and really implementing this with local communities. So I'd love to turn now to Regina, because as part of your work at the AI for Climate Global Forum, you explore the use of today's most advanced technology to mitigate the risk of environmental crises, and to really also activate economies, to provide livelihoods to communities who live around nature reserves. So can you tell us how AI can really practically support the implementation of climate solutions, and how do these use cases differ across different regions? I really want to better understand how can this be really practically used to support the work of communities on the front line?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Selena. That's a really great question, and I'm really happy to be here. So like David said, AI systems can be used in a variety of ways to address environmental challenges, right? And we must always keep in mind that, well, climate change is a really complex phenomenon with physical, biological, and chemical variables that interact with each other in complex ways. And some high impact ways that AI systems can be used for climate action, for example, in practical use cases, like to monitor deforestation in real time, to map extreme events like flooding and forest fires, and to track greenhouse gas emissions, for example. And some of my favorite use cases revolve around the potential of leveraging these technologies in a responsible way to protect biodiversity, which is, I believe, extremely relevant at a time when almost 1 million species of plants and animals are at risk of extinction in the next couple of decades, right? And there's amazing people out there focusing their efforts on, for example, there's this project called PAWS, Protection Assistance for Wildlife Security, that focuses on stopping illegal poaching through gamification techniques in Africa. And now it started in Africa, but now you can find it around the world. And it's incredible because this effort is empowering rangers to use these technologies to monitor poaching hotspots and feel safer when they're patrolling conflicted areas. And their knowledge and their input, it's key for the success of these predictive algorithms, right? It's an amazing example of how communities and technologies can come together for a same goal. There's another use case, for example, the Wild Book project is using computer vision to identify individuals of a species like shark whales through publicly posted images, which is also an example that I love, because with this example, and scientists can create further public engagement in doing community science and providing data, vital data, to train algorithms for better prediction and image classification, which is helping scientists to better understand how species behavior and how climate change can affect their patterns and behaviors, right? Another use case in the global south, in South America, in the Amazon rainforest particularly, there's a project called Mapping the Andean Amazon project, right? And it's monitoring deforestation in real time using satellite technologies. And now in parallel, people from remote indigenous communities are being empowered to use mobile devices and satellite technologies, GPS, to alert authorities when trees are being cut down, for example. And results are showing that when people get involved, less trees are being lost in those areas, right? Again, the power of people working together for the same goal. And again, this data input, this involvement is vital to enforce conservation management plans that are informed by science, informed by technology, and by traditional ecological knowledge, the knowledge that the people that have been living there for generations can bring to the table, right? And it is not a coincidence that the best preserved areas are where indigenous communities are located. And this is really important to keep in mind, because we must, developers have always need to follow a human rights-based approach, right? And create a standard and a horizontal communication where people are being put at the table, because we need to keep in mind that AI-driven technologies are impacting humans, but they are also impacting all other life forms on the planet in complex ways as well. And we can encounter unintended consequences, right, of using these technologies. And this is where I also want to highlight the importance of having a diverse team of developers of technologies working, people from around the world, people from different backgrounds. And like David said, I remember that these are tools, right? And that they're not silver bullet, but they can be used in a whole range of ways that can help us achieve this shared goal.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate, first off, your background, and your talk about biodiversity, because it helps us really anchor ourselves in what we're trying to protect, the communities we're working with, and the reality on the ground, which can often feel really far away from, high tech solutions that are often, accessible to certain communities in certain places in the world. So I'm loving that there are ways that we're seeing this really come together but also hearing your requirements and caveats around having a diverse team and having a human rights-based approach and having this be in conversation as opposed to top down. I'd love to talk more about this. And also, Seth, you work at Meridian. You're helping kind of build understanding, guiding collaboration, and driving action to address the world's challenges. And you focus particularly on utilizing AI to create climate solutions. Can you build on this discussion and tell us more about your work and what you also see as key needs in the sector?
Yeah, thank you, Selena. And this, I think, Regina, to your point on data. So what I do at Meridian is I manage a philanthropic collaborative focused on supporting training and evaluation data for more equitable and accessible machine learning. So what that means in practice is we support research and startup teams to collect the data that underlies a lot of these really important machine learning models so that those models can be made available to solve challenges. And we do that across a lot of sectors: agriculture, language technologies, health, and soon to be in climate and energy models. And just a brief word, almost all machine learning models have a basis of human labeled data. And labeling data is time intensive, and a lot of, for example, data used to address original machine learning challenges was developed and made available even decades ago, but the tools that we need to support machine learning globally and to address a lot of these climate challenges, the sort of ground truth data set that David needs to match with satellite imagery to know where deforestation is happening, somebody had to produce that data set. And so we pool money from 9, at this point, governments, philanthropic funders, and private organizations to support research teams purely to create and open source that data. I also am involved with Youth Climate Lab, which is an organization that creates the sort of conditions for scalable youth climate action, especially sort of policy environments and capital. And then I also support some work at the UNFCCC related to forest and climate for a few governments. And so my job is as a facilitator. I'm not an AI practitioner, so I get to call 100 people a year and ask them your question, Selena. So this is based on what they said, and I'm grateful to those folks because this is really sort of coming from them. And in the foundation of Lacuna Fund's work is AI doesn't work equally well everywhere and for everybody. And that is in part, but not entirely related to what resources are available to develop it. And so when we think about key needs, there's data needs, and not just that data exists, but that it's available, accessible, gathered with informed consent, and that it is made available in a way that protects, if individuals are involved, the privacy, and sort of that is not only done at scale, but done in the right way. And it's I know David mentioned climate trace, and I was on a call with somebody who's done a lot of the power plant data sets the other day, and they said they're still not perfect and we still don't have a third of the world. And so just getting solid ground truth data is sort of an elbow grease need to support a lot of this work. And I know that Regina mentioned crowdsourcing, and that's been one way to really speed that up. And then it's a question of what happens to that data, whose is it once people have contributed their time and effort to create it. And so that's one challenge, is data availability, and increasingly as private organizations sort of monopolize that data, how is that shared and made available for climate solutions? So thinking just sort of on the needs question, the 3 big ones I see is one thing that we've encountered in Lacuna Fund is shifting incentive structures. Who is incentivized within academia, where some of this work is happening, to conduct applied research and apply it for the public benefit? And what's the role of public-private philanthropic funding in doing that? And then what is rewarded? Oftentimes in AI competitions, they will be assessed against a benchmark data set that represents so what are we assessing against? You know, if there's a large AI conference, are they, is there a use case? Is it, if you're checking the state of an art algorithm, is it against a diverse data set that has some real world implication, or is it something from the 90s that nobody's changed because they didn't feel the need? And I think sort of coming back to where young people engaging where the need is there, that just a push in the right place within and outside of these organizations can be really important in changing the focus. I think there's also a real need to translate and contextualize sort of results of these decision support and prediction tools, and especially to help people understand the outputs and the uncertainty that might be associated with them. And that's a really key sort of ethical need if people are basing decisions that have financial or health consequences for them on the outputs of these algorithms. And especially understanding when the algorithms work better or worse in different places or for different people. So that's sort of a scatter shot from the folks who we work with at Lacuna Fund, and I'll leave it there.
That's super helpful. Because I feel like it's capturing some of the hesitancy that I had when we start talking about AI and how this really connects to the reality of both young climate leaders, but also just other climate activists who are working in this space. And since the goal of the session is to really bridge those two worlds, we also need to discuss what youth climate action currently looks like, what that experience is like. So I'd love to turn to Pooja, because you've recently started the Youth Climate Collaborative, a for-impact organization striving for a world where young climate leaders have the means to really maximize their impact. So your mission is to guide and connect young climate leaders by reducing barriers to youth engagement in the climate space. So can you tell us what was the story, the motivation behind launching the Youth Climate Collaborative? How do you work to reduce the barriers to youth engagement? And how do you think this links to the conversation we're having now?
Thanks so much. And I also encourage everybody to check out Youth Climate Lab that Seth mentioned. They're based in Canada and do a lot of similar work. So with Youth Climate Collaborative, we began in November 2020. Thanks to a competition I won by the Climate Initiative, where they encouraged all youth to submit their plan to educate, empower, and activate youth in the climate space. And then I submitted a plan that I had just been working on alongside my job, which used to be as a coworker with Seth, and then had the opportunity to implement the plan starting in November 2020. And really my journey began in 2018 when I attended the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco, where even though Trump had pulled out of the Paris Agreement, the rest of the country, well, I shouldn't say the entire rest of the country, but many states and leaders like Al Gore were like, we're still in, so let's have this climate summit. And then after that, and I found out about that through USA, that's the United Nations Association of America. But after that, I was like, how do I continue to stay involved? And just in talking with other youth at that conference and in other spaces that I'm in, like in the Youngo space with David, just seeing the different barriers that youth are facing in trying to get involved and stay involved. Some of the barriers I face is like getting one in the US, like there's so many organizations and it's like really trying to figure out which one fits your style of the type of involvement you want to have in the space. And then some other barriers are financial need, like having an idea but not knowing where to go to find the funding to support your idea. Another is mentorship, having somebody to guide you in developing your idea, in writing a financial statement or a budget, putting together a project proposal, any and everything. Then another is emotional challenges. So like a lot of people are suffering from burnout in the space, eco-anxiety, climate grief, and it's, where do you go for the resources to cope with those emotions or to have that community to exchange strategies for coping with this? And then Regina was talking about humans' relationship with land and nature. And actually today I was reading an article where therapists in Vancouver BC are recommending more outdoor time to their clients as a way to strengthen their connection with nature and then thereby inspire them to better protect our earth. And so we're seeing more and more opportunities and conversation around the emotional toll of climate activism and involvement as well. Another barrier is, well, I've talked about just like knowing where to go to find opportunities. So there's a lot of databases, but it's like, how do we get the information that these databases even exist out to the public, like in advertising, promoting, so money for orgs to advertise and promote this kind of stuff. Like Facebook even blocked ads for any climate related thing because it was labeled as political. And it's like, that puts nonprofit organizations or just organizations in general who are working on very meaningful issues that are politicized, and then you can't even promote the work. And so you can't reach the audience you intend to reach. And then another one is low diversity in the field. Sometimes, like somebody was saying to me that there's this international organization, but then they went on to the platform to get involved, but all the opportunities were for US based folks. And so they felt like they didn't fit in. And like, so if the organization is just scaling up, right, and they're starting in one country and expanding, it's like, how can they better explain that this is their process so that if international folks do come on, they don't feel excluded. Then another big one is a lack of youth seats and voices at decision-making tables. So trying to get youth involved from the onset in co-creation. And one point I'll bring up for this, some facts. So there are about 1.8 billion young people between the ages of 10 and 24 now on this planet. So that's the largest youth population ever. And many of them are concentrated in developing countries, and 48 of the least developed countries. I don't like using the developing framework, but this is how it's written in the report. 48 of the least developed countries, children or adolescents make up a majority of the population. And then in general, 42% of people are under the age of 25, which is crazy. And so just thinking about, orgs will have no choice but to bring in youth. Brands are already struggling with this. The type of consumers they're seeing now from our generation and just people who are young, they're demanding more eco-consciousness in from design to just like thoughtfulness in what you're putting into the products, how you're developing products. And so it's in their benefit as well to have youth a part of their decision-making tables. Maybe I'll just mention one more. So another one is that there are a lot of organizations working in silos. We hear this often, right? Like you have your people working on water issues, people working on human rights, people working on forests. Now, how do we get everyone, like how do we get the public to perceive all of us as one community, right? One large community advocating to protect our planet and our people. And so that's something that's just like a general challenge in this space. Yeah, maybe later I'll talk about some of the ways that YCC is addressing some of these challenges.
Yeah, that would be great. I know as you're saying this, so much of this is resonating with me and a few others. I can see people throwing their questions in the chat. So please keep them coming on Slido. And also this last piece you said about really breaking down those silos and being able to have the public see us as one. And that's really the value of having this session is saying, can we actually get on the same page? How can we really mainstream AI and bring this to the forefront of the conversations we're having on climate. So Regina, I'd love to come to you, just building on what Pooja's just shared. Can you tell us more about how you think youth can really start to self-mobilize around harnessing AI for climate? Just based on the discussion so far, what do you think the opportunities are, and what have you seen happen on the ground?
Yes, thank you. Well, the youth and the Gen Z, they're being called now the AI natives or digital natives, right? So they've always known how to use digital products. It's really exciting because it's like a whole new generational shift in which more and more young people are now able to get into software and data management, right? And we're seeing young people that are reinventing the way we use, for example, social platforms and how we communicate. They can now, for example, take advantage of these mechanisms to analyze people's perception and feelings about climate change. Like Pooja was saying, this burnout that the youth are sharing now more than ever, and to be able to talk about it, to talk about climate change, which is one of the first steps and a real important step to take to move towards action. Right, and the youth, it's heavily concerned about the future of the planet and how this century of ecological and technological disruptions will impact them in the future. What will it mean if we trespass this 1.5 to 2 Celsius degrees threshold for their future, and how at the same time AI systems are transforming the job market and their career prospects, right? So it is really inspiring to see young people and movements of youth, like Pooja was saying, speaking out and putting themselves out there. We're seeing a whole set of new ideas and energy coming from the youngest to use all these available tools to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So I think bringing all these ideas together and capacities is vital. There are examples, for example, I can think of a boot camp that the United Nations Development Program hosted last year on SDGs and AI for youth. And for example, one of the amazing ideas that came up of a group of kids between their 12-year-olds was to create an app to redirect consumers to eco-friendly products. Or to connect suppliers with food near its expiration date with individual consumers to reduce food waste. So it is amazing that young people and with different cultural backgrounds and intersectionalities can bring to the table to self-mobilize to use AI for climate. And there are a lot of areas where AI systems have a great potential to be used for climate action. And there's room for everyone. And if you have, what you want to do is just to monitor deforestation, there's room for that, right? And there are a lot of initiatives that have the potential to further leverage AI technologies for climate action and working towards climate adaptation. Climate change mitigation is not a one-person party. It's a multi-dimensional effort that needs all hands on board. And what I can tell you is that there are several initiatives, for example, speaking from AI for Climate. We're now engaging in relevant conversations with voluntary groups made up of young people and local communities to explore how to better and responsibly deploy AI-powered strategies in a Mexican natural reserve to enhance the conservation of this area, for example. And there are several NGOs and startups that are willing to work together and really appreciate the effort and passion that young people are bringing to the table. And I think it is an exciting time to do this because the voices of the young, the voices of historically underrepresented groups, of LGBTQ groups, for example, are being heard more now than ever. So it's important to keep that in mind, that we have a strong power now that can take us really far away. So yes, that's my take on that.
Thank you. Thanks for giving us a taste of what's possible, and also some encouragement in the sense of, there's room for your ideas, your expertise. And I think, this is something that I think we should also be really principled about as young people, that these conversations and this growth in technology and innovation is happening. And so it's a question of whether you want to be in the room or not, and whether we want to have, the people, diverse perspectives at the table to be able to shape those solutions, as opposed to, letting those who already maybe have had access or have been in those rooms before continue to shape the space. So that's something that I'm personally grappling with as someone who's maybe not been super involved in exploring how AI can support climate action. But for those of us who may be, just wanting to come in and are interested, it would be great to hear some of the real challenges and the limitations to this work. So Seth, I want to come back to you to better understand what the challenges that you faced basically in facilitating this work. Are there unique challenges that come from AI-powered climate solutions as opposed to, regular human-powered climate solutions? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so with the caveat that I spend a lot of my day thinking about data availability, that when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. One thing, and I saw the climate change AI summer school posted in the chat, and one thing that we encounter is we essentially go out and talk to a bunch of people to try to create funding opportunities that are relevant to this, is that a lot of these people don't talk to each other, that the people who might hold the data that you need to build a solution, the people who are capable of building the solution, and the people who know what solution you might need are often in 3 different fields. And that's sort of prerequisite to doing something that works, right? And so the climate change AI, what David, Priya, what the team have done is incredible in terms of creating semi-formal spaces where people can actually have these conversations outside of the normal incentives in the corporate world and academic workshops and, like the pressures of finishing a PhD program and what have you, right? To think about what a solution, what a big solution is like in a world where everybody's pushed towards little and profitable solutions. So I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think also where thinking about where are young people uniquely situated here is the ability to go talk to everybody and pretend like the walls don't exist, and then maybe eventually they won't, right? No, in the sense that I think people who have been very focused on their particular field need to come together, and to the extent that can be accelerated, that's a really important challenge and a really important opportunity. I think another challenge that we encounter as we try to fund open data and tools is that it's easier to be private and closed than to collaborate. And that's the way we've set up our incentives, that, you ask a utility if they want to open their data or even provide their data to researchers, and they're more scared of liability than a climate catastrophe, right? Or even if you want to ask, and there are super, and I think David's going to talk about them, valid privacy and ethical concerns related to opening up data, but even asking a large international organization who could help build a disaster response chatbot if they want to, make their documents, which an algorithm could learn from open, right? That's for everybody now a really scary question, and I think that's where sort of some public engagement and advocacy could also be helpful. And I think the other challenge, of course, is perennially is funding, and sort of changing how we think of the risk of funding a certain initiative, and funding new organizations versus what if this work isn't done at all? That's also a risk, It doesn't have to be done by the same person who's been doing it for the last 20 years. So how do we change that calculus of especially people with enough philanthropic capital to really make a difference? And then the last thought about sort of challenges of doing this work for societal good and in the open is awareness of the importance of collaboration and open data to develop these solutions. Many funders and governments have open data clauses in their funding that they provide to, these large organizations that they don't even know about or enforce, right? And if they do, then it's not truly open. So those are just sort of thinking about some of the challenges. There's also sort of, along with the funding challenges, comes the capacity to conduct extensive processing, to have what's called compute. and that's centralized with a few large organizations and governments. So there's sort of, and I think, you know, folks have mentioned this, there's also, of course, a policy and a regulatory component to forcing folks to do this for the public good, essentially, that's coming around in a lot of countries.
I have so many follow-up questions, but I don't have time to ask them. So I'll just really appreciate your takeaway, and particularly the advice, I think, for young people to understand that they need to make a concerted effort to break down barriers. And so if you want to kind of employ AI as a tool, you're probably going to have to go outside your sector, beyond the network that you have currently, and start playing that connecting and facilitating role. So to build on this, David, I want to come to you because you're also quite experienced in this space. What are the limitations and dangers that young innovators should be aware of? And why do you still believe that AI can still be a powerful tool for the climate crisis?
Wow, where should I start? Actually, I have a whole list on awful AI applications. I just started as a hobby like 3 years ago with 3 examples, and it grew to 100 and more, like examples such as specifically climate relevant. You could use AI to figure out where to drill new fossil fuels, optimize all of the emissions, right? So AI is a tool, and it depends on who is wielding that tool, and that could be a good cause or it could be a bad cause, right? So like a whole lot of use cases there. But like I want to really focus here more on the topic of, okay, let's assume we have a good use case. Let's assume you want to protect the forest. What are potential limitations and pitfalls here? And I worked for the last 4 years in the forest space, and I have to say I'm a little bit angry about my fellow researchers. One of the things is, in the forest space, most of the biodiversity in the world, 80%, is protected by only 5% of people, indigenous people, which only make 5% of the world population, right? So it's a huge like margin of who's protecting the area and who's actually developing the algorithms. Because if you look at forest algorithms and like algorithms that use satellites to train machine learning algorithms to protect, for example, where it's going to be deforestation happening, all that development, most of the development happens in the global north, and also with global north data sets. And it's non-surprising because we always had a head start in technology because of our like colonial history, exploiting and having a head start in resources. We have a head start in data because our infrastructure can collect way more data, right? We have like a lot of data on forests. And what does that result in? Well, 2 things. And I think this is where the limitations really speak. First, our data sets are biased. So you have to imagine if you teach some kid like something and you show him only one set of books, let's say science fiction novels, he's not going to understand any other novels. He's not going to understand like romance novels or like fact books. And that's happening right now in the field of forests, for example, where we have algorithms developed on data sets that are basically European or like American forest data sets, and they perform really, really good in the US, but really bad in the places where it actually matters, right? And not only that, like when you claim as an engineer that you work on these areas, then you might try to collect these data sets from South America without the consent of indigenous people who are living there, right? So that's also a problem. Like, okay, sure, we want to collect as much data as possible, to be fair again, but then you need to understand the local circumstances of where this data set lives in, right? So that results in hybris. Like engineers thinking, we can solve the problem without actually involving the people who will use the solution, making a solution that no one will use in the end, right? So and this is also creating this is a climate justice problem, because like in the end, when you have algorithms that will be used for policy that are really good in one area and really bad in the other, that enforces inequality instead of helping, right? So it's really important, and that's the lesson I learned when I entered into the field, to actually involve local communities, involve the people who will use the algorithms to deploy, or maybe even better, co-design these algorithms with them. Because I learned so much from like just going to the field, not just sitting like in the US or in Europe and developing the algorithms, but actually looking at the forest and understanding, yeah, sure, we have this and this metric, but that's not how things work there, right? For example, I'll give you one example of, I'm running a startup that uses AI algorithms to pay out people. So we try to leverage, okay, we have monitoring of the forest, but how can we go further? How can we maybe channel resources and funding towards those local communities? And we use these AI algorithms, satellite-based training, to detect, okay, this area has been like removing less forests than this area. So this area, same local community, but this village should get paid more because they have like removed less, right? Wrong. This is like the mindset of like an engineer would solve the problem. But in local community, they explained it to me long-hairedly, David, that's not how we work in South America. Everyone is shared, everything is shared, we have a worldview. And actually by like us wanting to maximize like a certain metric, that's not how we should implement things. And that's the result of not talking to the stakeholders, right? So I think it's really, really important to consider that current AI development is centralized. It's very, very industrialized in the global north. And that's a problem, that it's not diverse. And Regina and Seth and Pooja, they said very, very well and correctly, we need to empower the youth, especially young people who are like across like global south and north, to take on new AI development, to not just be users of existing AI algorithms, but to actually implement them themselves. Because one of the things which gives me hope for AI is the thing that the moment you develop an algorithm, it's not done yet. You need to still explain it to the people how to use it. So people, young people from local communities, they are the ones who can form bridges between technology and, for example, indigenous people, right? They can explain it. I cannot explain like how, for example, like an AI satellite-based algorithm, it will work on like an indigenous like leader, but like someone from that community knows the culture, knows the way to express it. So I urge young people who are listening here, take action, implement these algorithms for yourself. Don't just be users, be active developers of your own future, because there's a lot at stake and you need to be the bridges for those communities.
I was just taking notes because I very much appreciated everything that you were saying, and just being reminded that, you know, to do this properly, you need a cross-sectoral group of people, different skills, and that's the opportunity that we want to discuss today, that there is really room for everyone. And we should be having these discussions more so that we can bridge the different expertise that, we have in the youth climate movement. And Pooja, I want to come back to you to just bring it back to how we mainstream AI into existing kind of climate spaces. You've shared some of the challenges that young people are facing. We've heard some of the unique challenges that are relevant to AI. So what are your reflections based on the discussion so far? How do you think we can move forward in terms of bridging these two conversations?
Yeah, if this is about getting more youth involved in AI field and having, so we talked a lot about collaboration. So the collaboration I want to focus on is between like adult allies and youth, or adult and youth partnerships, right? And how do we create a pathway for youth to learn about AI, to learn about AI and climate, AI and SDGs, and then get involved and stay involved, and then also see it as a viable income earning opportunity, so that it's not just all volunteer time, but that they can actually earn a living, while being in this space. And not just that, but a lot of the youth, like we talked about this eco-consciousness, right? So how do we show that there are well-paying jobs where you're simultaneously focused on the greater good and open source data, while where you're able to make money and have a positive impact on community at the same time. And so there's this growing focus, even by the International Labor Organization, on green jobs and getting youth to see these green job pathways. So what corporations, nonprofits, and just anyone working on AI can do is have these capacity building workshops for youth, right? So like how to use LinkedIn, even in high school, right? Like how do you use LinkedIn? How do you write a resume? And then where are places that they can go to learn about AI? Where can they find mentors to guide them through their AI journey, right? Like here are the different pathways that are available to you in AI. Here's how you can go the startup route like David, or how you can join a corporation, or how you could even start smaller size projects in your local community. And so, yeah, that's one big focus. Is there anything else you'd want me to touch on in this one?
Yeah, I think the direction you were just going in, I was looking at the questions that have come in, and someone was asking really, where can youth go to use AI to create climate solutions? How can we start? And so it seems like that barrier that you had talked about early on, and is something that we can try to address today. So yeah.
I'll add to that. So I've put some links in the chat, so I encourage everyone to check out some of those links. And then also, if you're not on LinkedIn yet, like get on LinkedIn, and then I would just do keyword search of like AI, find who near you is working on AI, and just message them. Like say, hi, I see your organization. I'm, this age from here. I really want to get involved. Is there a way that I could get involved with your organization, either in a volunteer capacity or, in an intern role or something? And if not, do you know where I could go? Is there somebody you could put me in touch with? Like really use LinkedIn. It's super beneficial in that way. You can also look up conferences that are happening that are on AI, like this one. Look at the speakers, see where the speakers are from, which organizations, right? And then follow them on LinkedIn. You can like click that little bell thing to get notifications for whenever they put a post out. Follow people like young leaders like David on Instagram, like Regina. Like pay attention to where people, like who people are representing, where you can find them online, and then, really just work on building that confidence to reach out. I know a lot of this comes down to confidence and shyness, like when working with youth, but really don't be afraid to get out there. And if you feel like you yourself are shy, maybe asking your parent or like a trusted role model to help you, write this email and send it out, or send it on your behalf. Like just remembering that you're not alone in this, right? So lean on people who've done this before you. I see some other links in the chat. Yeah, and then also, visit the, well, on YCC website, there's not too many AI orgs on there, but we have this eco action map where we're trying to get organizations to put themselves on the map so youth can literally like zoom in to where they live and see what orgs are near them that they can get involved in and stuff. And then I guess I'll just do a shout out, like if you're a young leader who's got projects that are making change in communities, like we have this Dare to Envision podcast, and I'll be taking submissions for like interviewees for the podcast. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me for that. I'll share my email in the chat.
That's wonderful. Some really practical next steps for people on how to stay part of this conversation, how to get involved. David, I also saw you throw a few things in the chat. Do you want to just share a little bit more on the opportunities that you can offer?
So climate change AI has, because we're working on this intersection, we understand how important it is to bring everyone together. And because of COVID, of course, the way to do it nowadays is virtually. So we have like two options. One, which is our Circle, our community platform. That's the first link I shared. You can just join. It's a forum where we gather resources. So we share links, we share about data sets, we talk about collaboration in case you're looking for collaborations. And then the second one is more hands-on. So this is more like a virtual space, like a Zoom hangout where you can just join in every first and third Wednesday of a month. And some of us in the core team are there. Other people who are interested in the intersection of climate change and AI are there. and then you can just join and just randomly talk about how was your vacation or what's your craziest AI algorithm you're developing. So anything is open for that space. It's a safe space. Those are safe spaces, and we really care about this as well. So please feel free to join and ask us any question, because no question is a stupid one.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much. It's great to have those informal spaces to connect. And in just 5 minutes, we're also going to get into breakout discussions, which I'll introduce in a bit. But there's still a few more questions in the chat I wanted to pose to the panelists. So for Regina, there's a comment here that said, I love these connections to emotional and mental wellness when pursuing climate activism. How can we bridge this human element aspect when discussing AI? And since you have the connection in terms of the use cases and the work that's done with Indigenous and local communities and AI, what are your thoughts around bridging these two narratives?
Yes, so it's really important to bring all actors to the table, right? And it's not always easy. And effective communication between scientists and people has always been a challenge, right? Translating scientific language to my language before I got into the space, it was really hard for me to understand. So I think it's really important for people that are developing, that are working in the space to create more effective communication channels and language and ways that we can all communicate and understand each other, right? And like Pooja said, it's about getting out there and talking to people and reaching out and saying, hey, let's do this together. And I have this interest, and I know you have this expertise, for example. So it's really just about getting in touch with people and bringing, like you said, not being top down, but having these horizontal conversations where everyone has something to put always on the table. Like David said, there are no stupid questions in this arena, that we're all starting to get to know better, right? So yes, that's my take on this.
Thanks. And Seth, I want to come to you because there's some questions on data. So just to throw some of them at you, and you can take the ones you feel most comfortable with. First off, I guess, what type of data sets are we talking about? I know David had mentioned a few key sectors, but I'd be curious to learn what types that you're working with. Can you describe the type of data, who owns the data? And then lastly, Josh had a question, and I'm not sure if you have some advice for him, but he said, what are the 3 key steps you'd advise to begin introducing AI for data collection in recovering / developing nations, key industries? So do you have any advice on those who kind of want to start wading into the data collection space?
So maybe with the caveat that not only did climate change AI write one good paper, but then they put together a list of data set needs and current status for key use cases across domains. And and maybe I'll turn to David in a sec to say more about that, but one key part of it was this data full stop does not exist versus this data exists and somebody has it, versus this data is out there but not applicable in all places. So there's sort of a spectrum of needs depending on the use case. In terms of what that means in agriculture, could be, say, for example, just field boundaries, which might be easy in a part of the world where the average field is several hundred meters, or even like a kilometer by a kilometer. But when it's a smaller intercropped field, it's a lot more difficult to recognize from satellite imagery. So it might be somebody literally walking around a field with a GPS, and those polygons constitute a data set that helps somebody make a prediction about food security. Or sometimes it's data collected somewhere that's linked to a GPS point that's then linked to satellite imagery. Other times, say for electricity, it might be data that's released from a utility, or using something like nightlight data to try to predict where is electrified and where isn't. So it's a combination of sort of image data, text, and then other sort of, image text, and then linking those together. What was the other question?
The second one, yeah, was a question on what are the 3 key steps you'd advise to begin introducing AI for data collection in developing countries. And he actually had mentioned some key industries such as agriculture and mining. So you did speak a bit to the agriculture component. Don't know if you have some advice.
One thought, and this is from just, again, I'm not an expert, but we read, and farm out to our technical experts, several hundred proposals on folks trying to do this. And there are a lot of open source tools that are already available. And so I think both looking, but then asking people who might know about those tools. So like, for example, for survey-based agricultural data collection, their ODK is a really strong and easy framework to implement, and that might save you a ton of development time and also make your data available in a format that is usable for others. So I think talking to folks who are doing the work and seeing what common resources there are out there. But
That's, yeah, brilliant.
Really folks who are actually doing it.
Exactly. Thanks for giving us that next step. I think it's really important. I know there's so many questions and kind of things that we still haven't fully fleshed out, but this is our opportunity now to have a conversation all together with everyone who's joined in breakout groups to better, we need everyone's expertise. This is what we've talked about here. So yes, we've pulled together, the 4 panelists and myself, and we're all just learning. But in terms of the next step, our long-term goal of really mainstreaming AI as a tool for climate action, and particularly within youth movements, we need to have a discussion together. So what we want to do is really take 10 minutes in breakouts to discuss the first question, which is, how do we think we can really mainstream AI? How do we bridge these 2 movements based on what we've just discussed? And then the second question will be looking for main opportunities and how we can turn them into reality. So really practical next steps. This will shape the AI manifesto. So you have an opportunity to connect to really some of these long-term initiatives of collecting young people's ideas and really informing decision-making after this. So yeah, I just want to introduce that to everyone. We will have a questionnaire to capture the audience questions. And let me just throw that in the chat. So I think, to the tech team, we can all head out into our breakout groups. And the question is, how can we mainstream AI to accelerate climate action, particularly within the youth climate movements, which is where we can really play a role. So I will close this panel discussion and we can move into our group discussion and breakouts. I will see you there. themselves.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, so many recordings. And to get to know, I guess, the backgrounds, the different backgrounds that we have. And I also wanted to just recognize that, we're not all in the same, we don't all have the same kind of experience and expertise. So if you don't feel as comfortable kind of answering the specific question, that's totally fine. We started off kind of sharing some frustrations and some ideas to help each other out as it's related to the topic. So feel free to lean on this kind of group and community as you need to get your questions answered. But the second breakout that we want to go into is better understanding where you see opportunities. So in this whole discussion that we've had, where do you see hope? And then what next steps do you think we should be taking to turn that opportunity into reality? So that's what we have going on. I think we're going to go into different breakouts. So definitely take some time to introduce yourself first before we get into the conversation. I hope I'll hear about. Big thank you. A big thank you to everyone who's joined us for this conversation, for this discussion, questions and answers, really engaged. And yeah, to just share that I think this has been a really important conversation. At least for me, this has been my first one on AI, and there's so much that I feel I can be doing to really support this work, to share more information with everyone. So if you didn't have a chance to fully flesh out your thoughts, please do check out the Google form and feel free to submit that later. This is just the start of the conversation. So yeah, I just want to say thanks a lot and enjoy the next session that I think will start in about 1 minute.
There's a raised hand. I don't know if you want.
Oh, yeah, Casimir, I don't know if you have a very brief question, maybe we'll be able to answer it in the chat.
Oh, okay. I just want to say something. Understand? I'm confused. Right? I want to know: is there any school that offer climate change as a course in the university? You go.
Yeah, yes, that's a great question. I can't answer that for you right now, but I would suggest that maybe you check out the resources that Pooja threw in the chat from the Climate Collaborative in terms of finding resources near you. But there are a few opportunities.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Selena. Thank you, Selena. And on that note, actually, Casimir, feel free to send us an email and we will answer the question. We will look into resources and share them with you. I'm sharing the email of the lab in the chat. Okay.